a South Asian Canadian channel.
And you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का #1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9.
Television. You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.
You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y. A South Asian Canadian channel.
Hello and welcome to The Editor's Take. I'm Ramona Singh and we're talking today about the Russia and Ukraine war and the geopolitical fallout. And joining me is Y Media's group editor, Yudhvir Jaswal. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ramona ji, and I hope our viewers are doing great as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so please tell us about what's been going on, what is the fallout, and how is this war going to end?
I think the Russian Defense Ministry, they've recently announced that whatever military objectives they had, they've almost done that. And I think Russia wanted to make sure, first things first, they wanted to tell Ukrainians that yes, as much as the West would always talk, but in case there is any direct military conflict, the West won't come to help. And that's exactly what we've seen. Second thing, they were not basically focused on the entire Ukraine. They were mainly focused on the Donbas area, and they wanted to connect the Crimea and the Donbas, all that area. They've pretty much done that as well. Third point is that Russians have faced more casualties because the Ukrainians, they got a lot of support from the West, whether most of them were, yes, there was defensive equipment, not the aggressive equipment as Ukrainians wanted. So that is another point to be considered at this point. So I think primarily the objectives that Russia had, they are almost met now. Now Russia would definitely want to end the war on its own terms. That's, I think, this is the stage where Russia is. What do you think?
Well, I think with, over 4 million people have left the country, going to neighboring countries. I think 2.5 million are in Poland, the neighboring country, who seems to be the most outspoken against this war. And you have about 10 million who are displaced inside of Ukraine, worried about where things are going to happen. And Mariupol, you're hearing about it for endless weeks, about hundreds of thousands of people who are stuck for ceasefires. And this week was great to hear about the two countries, the delegations meeting in Turkey to be able to come up to a ceasefire and a peace plan. And it looked like Russia had agreed to that on certain basis of not joining NATO and not having nuclear energy on side of the Ukraine side. But then lately we hear that there was an attack from the Ukraine side on Russia's gas plant, and although it's not confirmed nor denied, I think that it sounded like Russia wanted to settle, but there's also lots of talks about that Vladimir Putin himself has had maybe not the best advice, or maybe false advice about how easy this task was going to be, given that it's now more than a month. So it's very hard to pinpoint how this is going to end and when it's going to end, I think.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint because things could still escalate. I'm not ruling out that factor right now. But I think more or less the objectives have been met. The West, as much as they're talking too much, but they haven't supported Ukraine till that extent that it can really go an offensive. Yes, they've crossed the Russian airspace, the helicopters have gone, and there have been strikes, and we've seen some videos of that as well. And Russia has acknowledged that. But the thing is, they haven't been able to go on an offensive now, and they would want to strike a peace deal as much as Russia would want to do that.
Yeah, and so what do you think essentially Russia wants from Ukraine and how this started? Essentially, we did see for weeks on end before the February 24th date of them invading Ukraine, the tanks were lined up, and a lot of people didn't think it might happen. There was a lot of speculation it would. And then when the war started, a lot of the Ukrainian citizens were very shocked that it actually happened. So what is it essentially that Vladimir Putin, I don't want to say Russia as a country, but Vladimir Putin and his executives want.
Yeah, you're right. Not Russia as a country.
Yeah.
It's basically what Vladimir Putin, what he wants, what basically his close circle, the close-knit group, what they want. You're right. That's first of all, we need to make a clear distinction. That's not the Russians who wanted this. It's just the close-knit group that they wanted this, especially Vladimir Putin. He's never accepted this thing that yes, USSR, it's no more USSR, it has disintegrated in 1991. Now you have Russia, Georgia, and Ukraine, and so many other countries. But we all know this for a fact that yes, Russia and Ukraine, the two biggest groups in USSR. So Vladimir Putin, as he always says, this is our territory, these are like our brothers. And the second point which Putin has always been objecting to is that how the West, especially US, how they're getting closer with every step that they take. And of course, whether it was in 2008 when they attacked Georgia, whether it was 2014 when they attacked Crimea, and now once again in 2022 when they've attacked Ukraine, there was one single underlying point to prove that Russia is still a superpower. Because as much as we know that yes, during the Cold War era, there were only two superpowers, one was the States and the other was Russia. But now because of the economic reasons, and of course USSR disintegrated as well, and that was precisely the economic reasons as well. But now Russia wants to once again prove a point that as much as China is coming up as the new superpower, but Russia is still there. And I think more or less Putin has proved that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And since this war has started, we've seen the NATO member countries, put in sanctions against Russia, and a lot of countries who are not even NATO members, like Switzerland, who usually stays neutral, they came in and also, condemned and had their own level of sanctions. And so now, how has India, who has not placed sanctions, become a focal point in all of this?
Yeah. I think there is always a ways to circumvent the sanctions. I still remember in 1998 when India conducted its nuclear missile test, there were lots of sanctions against India in 1998, almost 20 years ago. And at that time, India wasn't the $2.5 trillion economy that it is today. And at that time, India could circumvent the sanctions easily. And even in today's date, and since you're linking that to India, we're going to talk about India as well. But I think Russia is still selling oil to Germany and other European countries, including Spain and Italy. So there are still major sources of energy. And all these countries, as much as they're trying to create alternate sources of energy, but then here it is Israel, which hasn't condemned. Here is Turkey, which hasn't condemned. Saudi Arabia, UAE, they haven't condemned. And so is China, Pakistan, and India. Now let's talk about India in particular. I think there has been a flurry of leaders and diplomats who rushed to India recently. We'll start with Wang Yi, the Chinese Foreign Affairs Minister. All they wanted was that this year's BRICS should be successful, because BRICS without India, as much as you have other countries, but BRICS without India wouldn't be that successful. The Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministers comes to India and they almost say that yes, Prime Minister Modi, if he could attend this year's BRICS. That was one point. Then you had the Japanese Foreign Affairs Minister. And after that, we had the virtual discussion of Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And now let's talk about the focal point. The British Foreign Secretary, she comes to India with a clear-cut message that as much as you haven't condemned Russia, but the West wants you to make sure that you talk tough on Russia. That's the British Foreign Secretary. Then you have, at that very time, you have Sergei Lavrov, the Russian Foreign Minister. He arrives in India. But the good part was, among all these foreign affairs ministers and all these leaders, there is only one person who gets an audience with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he is Sergei Lavrov. And another interesting part was that Sergei Lavrov, in his address to the media, he clearly accepts this, that yes, if Prime Minister Narendra Modi wants to intervene, India's policy has been neutral, so we would accept that. So the West also clearly knows this thing. And the US Deputy National Security Advisor, as much as he's of Indian origin, he was also there and he talked tough that India could face consequences. Does India want any lecture from the West? I doubt so. What's your take on this?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to, first of all, Turkey trying to be the country that brings the both delegations from both countries to have the peace talks and ceasefire. But now it seems like, you're right, the Foreign Affairs Minister Lavrov has said that it could be India that could be the one that settles the entire situation, and saying that we'll provide India whatever they need. And now India's buying, oil from them at $35 a barrel, which is, and they're increasing, their ability to purchase. And India said very clearly that we're always going to look for good source of energy when the markets are hot and when prices are so high. So not only are they taking advantage of a situation, a global geopolitical situation, but also at the same time, what's interesting is, you're right, when it comes to U.S.'s stance, they're saying it will not be taken lightly, but they're also saying India's a friend and we want them to consider and also not ramp up the purchase of oil. So it seems like everyone understands what India is doing, but they're not fully condemning it, and they're almost on their tip-toe. And India understands what it's doing in a sense where Russia going through their invasion, understanding that all these countries rely on its energy source, and saying, well, are you really going to cut us off? Because you're right, Germany hasn't cut them off, and their allies like China hasn't really condemned them to a degree, and you're at India and Israel. And so I think they thought the power's on their side, even though the sanctions have happened. But when it comes to India, now it looks like they've shown that they're a superpower as they're doing what they please. And if it was, I think if it was any other country, would that country get sanctions? Like, for example, if Canada decides they're going to go buy, oil from Russia at $35 a barrel and increase the import, how would that look? Right? I mean, mind you, Canada is a NATO member country, but if it was a non-NATO member country, I would think that if it's not a superpower, all the NATO members would probably sanction that country as well. So it's very interesting to see like who's too big to really, go against. And it looks like India's now positioned that way.
Yeah, you're right. India is positioned that way because we all know India is one of the top 5 economies, and in the next 15, 20 or 30 years, I think if you look at the top 3 economies, we all know it'll be China. China could become the first country who will cross the 50 billion mark, 50 trillion mark, and then US or India could be at second or third. And of course, it's only a matter of time when China surpasses states, when India goes ahead of states in terms of economy. So the top 3 will, in the next 15, 20, 30 years, one thing is for sure, if circumstances don't change very dramatically, China, India, and states, they'll be the top 3 countries. So I don't think so anybody really wants to create a major fuss with India. Then another aspect being that as much as we all know, let's talk about the oil aspect. You're right, Germany and many European countries are still buying their energy sources from Russia. In India, I think it's mainly reliant on Saudi Arabia and UAE. India still buys, I think, approximately 7% of it all from states, and then maybe a 1% or 2% at the max it would buy from Russia. So it's not a major concern. The only thing would be why the defense ties as well. S-400 India wants to buy from Russia, then other defense equipment, and still a lot of defense equipment is still being supplied by Russia as we speak. So the defense ties are there. And another aspect is that Russian Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov, he's openly said that yes, we can circumvent the dollar thing. Yeah. They're ready with the ruble-rupee arrangement. And as much as they tried to threat Germany and other countries that yes, you should also start buying in ruble, we don't want to deal in dollars anymore, though that threat wasn't really accepted that way. But with India, things are really different. Yes. Yeah,
and it sounds like because Germany's now gone into rationing their oil, right? Because of the discrepancy in disputes and payment. Yeah. And it could be because they wanted the ruble payment. And so, now this deal about ruble rupee, that's a big, clear distinction that we don't care about the sanctions. We're going to do what we're going to do. And to that point, if another country does it, then what would happen to that country, whereas India seems to be too big to do anything to, whereas you look at Pakistan on February 24th when the invasion occurred, and it was the same day Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan, landed in Russia, and he had his talks again. It was about a pipeline, and so now Imran Khan is facing something very severe, confidence of no vote confidence, and he's saying that it's because of a conspiracy that he pissed off a bigger country. How true is that? And tell us a little bit about that crisis.
Yeah, no, that crisis was already brewing, because that's what has happened in Pakistan. If you look at the history of Pakistan, in 70 years, there was only once that, yes, the baton was passed from one democratically elected government to the other one. Otherwise, we've seen the democratically elected governments, they haven't completed their tenure. That was in 2008 to 2013. That was the People's Party of Pakistan, Asif Ali Zardari. Yes, he did manage to complete his tenure. But other than that, it's, as has always been, the tenure has been cut short, whether it was a martial law or there are others who are coming in. Like the last government, Nawaz Sharif, they were toppled, and then you had Imran Khan coming to power. And now he's just having a taste of his own medicine. As much as he promised, the slogan was Naya Pakistan, a Pakistan which would be free of corruption. That really didn't happen. Pakistan is still having all sorts of troubles with inflation, economy. They're still reliant on loans. So nothing really much changed for a common Pakistani. And I'm not saying that the opposition would change, because these are all tried and tested parties, whether it's the Pakistan Muslim League Noon, the Nawaz Sharif group, or the Pakistan People's Party, the Zardari group, or there are others as well, smaller parties. But they've tried this Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Imran Khan's party, and here we are, that yes, it hasn't made much of a change from a common man's perspective. So the parties were already planning to put all the pressure up, and I think, yes, this was one of the last-ditch efforts by Imran Khan, that he tried to discuss with Pakistanis, and he brought up a powerful country, which he was claiming to be America, that yes, a powerful country will now dominate our foreign policy. But that has been the case. I heard his lecture, he said that after 9/11, I was sitting in this exact room when General Musharraf and all of us were sitting over here, and we got a call from states. Right after 9/11, they said either you're with us or you're against us. As a matter of fact, yes, General Musharraf agreed to join the war on terror, and states thought we got it easy. We thought there would be some sort of reluctance from the Pakistani side. But this begs the question, did Imran Khan walk out of that conference? He was still a part of the Musharraf government, even after a year or so. He was still part of that war on terror, which now he says that yes, this is what we've done something really wrong. But he still supported the Musharraf government. And for now, I think his government is facing, because this is a constitutional thing. The opposition numbers, they need 172, but their numbers are way higher than 172. They've managed higher numbers. So it's basically at the floor, his government, whenever tested, they do not have the numbers. That is the key problem. It's not about, America has always dominated the proceedings in Pakistan. That is true. That has been true forever. But whether it's Imran Khan, he was expecting a call. He tried his best to get the connections going with Joe Biden, but Joe Biden, since getting elected, he never even bothered to call Imran Khan. So that's also one of the issues which Imran Khan is having. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's connecting the entire thing given the geopolitical nature of what's going on in the region.
Yeah.
And I think his fate's going to be known very soon and how that fallout's going to be. But going back to the issue of the war, and I want to get your take on it, because some people say that given that there's so many Ukrainians misplaced, like 10 million misplaced, could it be, and also that the current attack on Russian soil was an internal job? There's some speculation that they attacked themselves as a false flag operation to justify to continue the war, to say, hey, we were going to do a ceasefire, now this happened, now we're going to continue our operations and regroup ourselves. Could it be that now that so many people are moving out of Ukraine, and no one's really coming to help them aside from sending them, defense weapons and, making sure that there is immigration status for refugees from Ukraine. Could it be that so many people are misplaced and now eventually it's easier for Russia to move in and they just continue, and in the long term they actually do take the territory that they want in parts of Ukraine? Do you see that as a possibility?
Yeah, I think they could take parts of Ukraine. Taking over the whole Ukraine, I doubt that's going to happen. The Donbas area, connecting that to the Crimea area, that is one part. You're talking about Mariupol. Yes, that port is an important area. But Russia has attacked many areas which doesn't have any military installations. Mm-hmm. And that was precisely the reason you're talking about the refugee crisis that we're witnessing, because those were all civilians. I mean, they've attacked shopping malls, they've attacked buildings, they've attacked cinema halls, they've attacked all sorts of civilian areas. And that's why we've seen Because yes, the TVs and the TV networks, they've all covering that particular area. Because when you see, Ukrainians fleeing their own country, especially the children, I think more than 60% of the children in Ukraine, they have been displaced today. Yeah. So it's a major crisis right now. Now to your point regarding the helicopters, I saw that video which entered the Russian airspace. Helicopters are clear, they are Ukrainian helicopters, they entered the airspace of Russia. And yes, Ukraine would do something like that. Why not? Because it's being attacked. So Ukraine, this is what Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking the West. We need weapons where we can go on the offensive. The weapons that you have been supplying us, they are in the defensive. He's been openly asking that you have the planes, you have the fighter jets, you have the tanks. Even if you supply us 1% of the NATO weaponry, we would be able to go on the offensive and we'll be able to fight Russia at a much better level. But then they didn't have all this, and now I think here we are. That yes, they've mainly been on the defensive right now. But I think 2 or 3 times they tried to go on the offensive. But I think Russia has met its objectives. Only thing Russia wants is to leave everything on its own terms. And would China play an important role? I'm not ruling out China because Russian economy is still very much reliant on China. Would India play an important role? Would China let India play an important role?
That's another important question.
Yeah, there's so many complexities, in the geopolitical scenario. But I think this certainly has so many opportunities for China, so many opportunities for India right now. And I think with the new changing world, with the new world order, I think Russia has certainly shown to the West, and especially to the Ukrainians, that here we come, we are much stronger than ever.
Yeah, and and this point I want to actually hear your opinion on is when you look at all of this conflict and the war and the devastation, one thing you look at is like what industry is mainly benefiting from all this, and you're seeing a lot of defense weapons sent to Ukraine, and a lot of countries are now arming up. They're increasing, like Canada is one, right? Is this like an arms race now? And is it just that industry is now booming as a result of obviously the war, but now all the other countries have to now make a plan for what this means?
I think you've made up a very good case, and that's a very strong point that you just made regarding the arms race or increase in the weapons that we see. Certainly that is going to happen because first of all, the Ukrainians, they would think on these lines, wish we had more weapons. This is Ukraine thinking. Yeah. Then the next thing is the Indo-Pacific area. There's lots of issues in the Indo-Pacific area as well. That's why US is threatening that just in case China comes on the line of actual control of India, Russia is not going to come to help. That's a threatening that US is sending towards India. So India might want to strengthen its arms as well. And then maybe Pakistan would want to strengthen itself as well, just in case there is any sort of conflict. Now let's talk about, you mentioning about Canada. NATO has been pressurizing all its allies that you have to spend 2% of your GDP on your arms. Right now the average is 1.5%. Like we had our budget of 17 billion, 18 and then maybe 19 or 20 billion dollar budget. But if we have to really make that commitment, actually we have made, our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made that commitment that by June there'll be changes, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that in our budget as well. We're going to see an increase in spending in our budget as well. So I think I've asked this question to our former Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan. I did ask this to our current Defense Minister Anita Anand as well, that how are we moving our budget from 19, 20, 25 billion or 30, 35 billion, where are we going to take it? I mean, Pakistan has a defense budget of $10 billion, and here we are, we almost have double the budget of Pakistan, and look where Pakistan is situated. I mean, here you have China, here you have Afghanistan, it's arch rival. India is there, and then certainly it has so many interests in Middle East as well. So Pakistan, having defense budget of 10 or 12 billion, we're already double that budget. How far can we go? That's another question.
Absolutely, and I was actually going to say, because I read that Jagmeet Singh said that he does not support the increase of the military spend, defense spend, and so now I was thinking they have the pact and he needs to approve their budget and he needs to be their alliance. So I was thinking, what does Justin Trudeau's partner think of the commitment they've made to the NATO?
What do you
spend?
think about that?
I think that's going to be very interesting because they're going to need the budget to be passed, and I think for that if they're committing to it. I think they might get support from the Conservative side if the NDP does not follow through, and even from the Bloc Quebec, because I think they would see alignment in making sure that Canada's up to the NATO spend of the 2% per GDP.
I want to ask you here, what do you think, should Canada be ramping up its defense budget? Looking at the situation right now, I mean, almost $237 billion deficit, and now this year again around $145 billion, and then another $58 billion next year. These are, we're not talking about the debt as yet, these are all the deficits that we're seeing. Nobody's even talking about balancing the books right now, and are we in a position really, because all these social programs that we have committed, like the dental program that we've committed, pharma care we've committed, child care we've committed $10 child care, and there's so many other socialist ideas, the social programs that we've already committed. Then we have a commitment towards the environment as well, and we need to bring down the deficits and take care of our debt as well. Are we in a position to increase our defense budget, especially after this Russia-Ukraine conflict?
I think we definitely should, only on certain things. When it comes to this Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he's only mainly, well, he tries to focus on domestic issues more than international affairs, and that's why Canada in the world stage hasn't been positioned the right way that it needs to be in these past, few terms that he's had. And I think after he says internationally and very publicly, we've run out of weapons to give you, we'll try to borrow and buy some and give to you. When you make a statement like that in an international arena as like a G7 country, a NATO member, and somebody who, a country that is part of these discussions with the other NATO members in terms of what to do with this war, I think that you have to back that up by essentially saying to Russia and everybody else, sorry, we can't defend ourselves, we've run out of everything, we'll beg, we'll borrow, we'll do whatever. And the language, I think, needs to be a lot more mindful, and I think we need to be positioned, because we're looking at countries that are not prepared, right? Like when I looked at interviews with some of the Ukrainian people, and they said, you know what, we knew about the tanks coming to the borders, but we weren't warned to make a plan for ourselves to migrate to another country, so they're leaving their homes with just barely of seconds or minutes and grabbing whatever they can, and then they're in destitute. Men have to stay back in that country because they have to defend their country. So you have a lot of women and children who are now, in many different places. And, there's a lot of rapes that happen in these situations. There's a sex trade, there's a lot of assault. And so, there's that side of the war that I think hasn't been talked about as much as this arms race that we're looking at. So I think in this dire circumstances, when you have a prime minister that says, sorry, we have nothing, we've given you everything, it shows that we do need to spend.
Yeah, and another question that I wanted to ask you, this Russia and Ukraine conflict, as we're discussing this, the geopolitical fallout. Of course, so many countries, I won't say they've been exposed, but certainly what's their limit? Certain countries might be trying to punch above their weight, but here clearly so many things are visible. I'll start with Russia. I mean, they've clearly demonstrated that yes, at least they have the will. If they want, they can attack someone at the military level. I mean, when was the last time China fired a shot? You tell me. I think it has been almost 50 years they fired a shot, So they haven't been, their army's not war ready. And here, once again, China didn't say much. I mean, as much as we call China a superpower, yes, it is, because of its economic reasons. But whenever there's a conflict, where is China? China seems to be missing in action. Russia has proved something. Ukraine, their will, and I'm all with the Ukrainians, and my heart goes out to all the Ukrainians. Yes, there are certain discussions going on in Ukraine. The West, the entire NATO force, where are they? I mean, at least Russia does know that they won't be coming in as a military power, but they couldn't scare off Russia. Then Pakistan, of course, as much as it is geopolitically at a very good location, but states didn't even bother to call Pakistan. And India, you see whether it's Liz Truss, the US Foreign Secretary, whether it's the Deputy National Security Advisor for US, so many other foreign affairs ministers, they're all lining up to meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, or even their counterpart S. Jaishankar. And I think, where does Canada stand among all these things now? Are we still the peacekeeper, or are we've been just trying to punch above our weight up until now?
And I think it's that is truly the question in terms of understanding where Canada fits into this bigger picture. Because right now, Canada has the 4th largest reserves of oil in the world. And so a lot of these NATO countries like Germany and the rest of them who's saying, well, we want to have a new source of energy. Canada, you're a country rich in natural resources, you're a country rich in oil. Are you going to step up and be the provider? And Canada, of course, has its own climate targets, and of course, there's an agenda to be placed. But there's also the conversation to be had that can you balance the two, the need for energy, and as well as making sure that we reduce carbon emissions. That's a conversation to have, or is one at the detriment of the other? I think that's been the long-term debate. So there's all of this stuff where the world is looking at Canada, and Canada is saying, well, we condemn what's happening and we're doing our best, but really nothing has come from it. And we saw that when the Prime Minister was in Europe on those conversations. And, a lot of the media outlets here were saying, Canada says that we support you and we stand with you, but it looks like Canada's just standing around. Right? And there is that perspective that we're doing that. I mean, I'm going to say, it's great that we care about the domestic stuff, because at the end of the day, we need to have a good standard of living here in Canada. But I think we also need to be, as a G7 and a NATO member, we need to think about what our position is as a leader country.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Well, that is all the time we have today. Thank you for all your input on this issue that was happening, that we're watching unfold in Russia and Ukraine. And that's all the time we have for the Editor's Take. And thank you, Group Editor Yudhvir Jaswal.
Thank you so much. I hope our viewers did enjoy today's discussion. Thank you so much.
Take care, God bless you.